Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Aisha Subarkash. It's a journey all eligible Muslims are obliged to take at least once. Many save their entire lives for a chance to travel to the holy city of Mecca to complete the Hajj pilgrimage. But this year, the coronavirus pandemic has upended those plans. Usually about 2 million people visit Saudi Arabia for the Hajj. But as COVID-19 spread, the kingdom decided to ban foreigners from making the pilgrimage and severely limit the number of locals taking part. The economy is expected to lose about $12 billion from the scaled-down Hajj. Hotel operators, travel services, and thousands of businesses are affected. It's also the first time in the modern era that the Hajj has been curtailed this way. And it all comes as Saudi Arabia's caseload continues to grow, making the kingdom one of the region's hotspots. And joining me from Singapore is Nawab Osman, a visiting fellow at the University of California, Berkeley, who focuses on Islamic movements in Southeast Asia. And in Hamburg, Germany, we have Sara Bazoobandi. She is a fellow at the Arab Gulf States Institute in Washington, specializing in Saudi economic affairs. So Sara, Nawab, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you on the program. The world's largest Muslim gatherings is limited to about few thousands this year due to the coronavirus outbreak. So Nawab, how will Hajj be like this year?
I think the whole idea of Hajj itself is about a spiritual gathering that brings together Muslims from all around the world. The idea of the Hajj itself is that it is a gathering where everyone would, regardless of what kind of religion, what kind of sectarian background you're from, what kind of ethnic background you're from, or economic background you're from, you are equal in the eyes of God. Now, so what we will have, and often Hajj is a spectacle of colors, of people of various languages. It is a spectacle of diversity, which we will not see this year. I think it will be a more solemn affair. It will be a lot more homogeneous. The people who are allowed to attend are basically going to be the Saudis. And so, yeah, I mean, by the virtue of that alone, the whole idea or the spirit of the Hajj itself, the feeling of the Hajj will be very different.
Yeah. So Sara, what impact will this have, in your opinion, on Muslim countries in the Middle East and maybe beyond?
It is a controversial issue because some argue that, especially in the difficult times that the world is going through, we need more spirituality and we need to feel more united and close to one another emotionally and spiritually. But from pragmatic point of view, practically, this is the world's most serious threat at the moment that the human race is facing. Perhaps after the global warming, if I do not want to underplay the issue of global warming. In fact, the sheer seriousness of the issue does not allow any flexibility or any negligence to conduct this year's ceremony in any other way.
So now, do you think some will look to blame Mohammed bin Salman for the scaled-down Hajj and how he failed to contain the pandemic? Do you believe there will be some political ramifications for his rule?
No, I think, I mean, it's unfair perhaps to blame MBS for the inability to control the coronavirus. I mean, we have had much bigger problems in many other countries around the world in terms of how the virus has been managed. Of course, the number one country that we're all worried about is really the United States of America. But I think the Hajj, although of course, it's this religious, spiritual gathering that Sara talked about earlier as well. Beyond that, there's a big dimension of Hajj being an important tool for Saudi soft power diplomacy. So every year, for instance, during Hajj, the Saudi government, through various institutions such as the Rabita al-Alam Islami, and also the Saudi government itself, would invite government leaders, would invite academics, would invite religious leaders, community leaders, and so on to come and to be the guest of the king, to be the guest of these institutions. And that, would be a loss of sorts for Saudi Arabia, especially in the context of increasing regional sort of tension. I mean, you have this
Yes.
issue with Iran and to a lesser extent with Turkey as well. Saudi is trying to position itself as the dominant power in the Middle East,
Yes.
And it it's just basically lost one tool of its diplomacy that it could have utilized, especially in a year such as this.
All right. So, Sarah, how will this year's restrictions impact the kingdom's already shrinking economy?
The incomes that is generated in Saudi Arabia by what we refer to it as the religious tourism sector is 1/5 of the country's total non-oil revenue. So it is quite a significant amount of revenue that every year is being generated by for the Saudi economy, roughly around over 10 billion euros every year. So that loss is definitely going to be felt, and especially in the current global environment where the global economy is slowing down as a result of the global pandemic. We also have had several years of low oil prices, and Saudi economy being highly dependent on oil income has obviously been, before the pandemic, affected by that. So the world is going through a difficult economic time, so is Saudi Arabia, and tourism sector across the world has been affected by the pandemic. So does the Saudi tourism sector.
So what kind of economic consequences, Nahab, we're likely to see, especially on small and medium scale international tour operators, especially from countries like Pakistan, Indonesia, and Malaysia?
Now, for many of these small travel agencies that basically run these Hajj and Umrah packages, I think there would be a huge loss of income. I mean, many of these agencies will be hard pressed to even survive as a result of this pandemic, because we really don't know whether we might even have Hajj next year or when Umrah is going to be resumed. That's one aspect of this. But the other aspect is what it means for an individual Muslim who wants to perform the pilgrimage. I mean, for someone in Pakistan or Indonesia, it is a lifetime of saving that goes into performing the Hajj. And in the event, and many have basically put down a down payment, if not a full payment for the Hajj and Umrah sort of pilgrimage. There's a possibility that they might actually lose this if these companies go bust, and the potential of it is fairly high. I was in the United States, just earlier this year, and I was speaking to someone who was going for Umrah, and his Umrah package was cancelled. And he was, this was in Austin, Texas, and he was finding it difficult to recover back his down payment. So what more in a place like Malaysia, Indonesia, or Pakistan in that case?
Yes.
So there is that impact at the social level, which could potentially be problematic in some of these countries.
So, Sarah, given the current economic situation and the pandemic, do you believe the MBS will be able to deliver on his promises or ambitious plans mapped out in his so-called 2030 vision?
As I mentioned, the prospect of global growth is quite grim at the moment. It's not specific to Saudi Arabia or the economic strategies of the Saudi Crown Prince. The world is going through a very difficult time, and specifically countries like Saudi Arabia that relied on oil revenue are going to face serious challenges. For example, the IMF has predicted about more than 6% of negative growth for Saudi economy for this fiscal year. In other words, the various factors, the uncertainties that arise from unexpected reasons are affecting Saudi economy perhaps a lot stronger than the power of policymakers and implementation of those policies in Saudi Arabia.
All right, Sarah, Nawab, unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you very much for joining us on Straight Talk. Since the start of the pandemic, hundreds of millions of people have been hunkering down in their homes. Vacations and trips abroad became vague memories. But now, with the summer in full swing in the Northern Hemisphere, many travelers are hitting the beaches, parks, and other scenic spots. One country that's welcoming visitors back to its shores is Turkey. Home to some of the world's most recognizable sites, the country is hoping strict safety measures will encourage tourists to return. Haider Abbasi explains.
Tourists are trickling back to Turkey. For months, many have been tied down because of the pandemic, but some have decided it's now safe to cast off. They're heading to Turkey's southern coast, famous for its beaches and turquoise waters. These tourists from Britain have been coming for years.
I feel safe here. Turkey's a safe place. I think, it's the weather's great, as you know, and I think the food's excellent, and so it's always been a favourite place for us, to be fair.
My grandparents live here, so we decided to take the plunge and to return back to our favourite place, Kalkan, where we feel really safe, and we love everyone here. So we decided that it would be good to get away from London, where the pandemic's obviously really, really bad, and come here where it's safe and everyone's healthy.
Like most industries, global tourism has been battered by the coronavirus. Borders have been closed and flights grounded. But in early June, Turkey lifted pandemic-related restrictions and welcomed visitors back. The government says it's confident the country is safe. Mutlu Ulutaş is the mayor of the seaside town of Kaş, where he says the virus has been eliminated thanks to the strict enforcement of safety precautions.
Since the virus emerged in Turkey in March, we haven't had many visitors. Locals were here, and Kaş is a spacious town. Everyone stayed home as much as possible, and we, as the office of the mayor and the governor, tended to their needs. During this process, public places weren't used. When they were, disinfectants were widely available, and masks and gloves were distributed.
Turkey has imposed what it calls a safe tourism certification system. Hotels, restaurants, and airports must meet 130 criteria to operate. These include strict hygiene regulations, social distancing, and the wearing of masks. Turkey is one of the most popular tourist destinations in the world. According to the UN, it was the 6th most visited place in 2019, with more than 50 million people coming here. In the same year, Turkey made nearly $35 billion from tourism. That's almost 12% of its economy. Although Turkey's restrictions have been lifted, the numbers are still much lower compared to previous years. Erol Sirkeçi owns a hotel in Kaş. He explains how his business has been affected by the pandemic.
If you look at last year's occupancy in July, it was about 90%. This season, it's around 30%. There's a decrease of more than half, but we expect and hope that after the Eid holiday, there will be an increase in the number of visitors.
Taking a holiday in many parts of the world is out of the question. But as Turkey's coronavirus infection rate continues to slow, it hopes the number of tourists will only climb. Haider Abbasi, Straight Talk, Kaş.
And joining me now to discuss this, I have Taha Arvas, a columnist for the daily Sabah newspaper here in Turkey, and in Alicante, Spain, I'm joined by Jennifer Iduh, the head of research and development at the European Travel Commission. Taha, Jennifer, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you on the program. So tourism season has opened and millions of Turkish citizens flock to the beaches, hotels, and their summer houses. Turkey, thanks to the measures it has taken at the beginning of this outbreak, has managed to flatten the curve. but is still not included in the EU's list of countries safe to travel to. So Jennifer, could you tell us about the dynamics of the EU's decision and what are the EU criteria that Turkey doesn't seem to fulfill?
This was a decision that was taken by the European Council. It's a decision that we have our doubts as to whether it is the right one or not. However, we recently issued a communication with the Airports Council International stressing the importance of reopening borders gradually with those destinations where the pandemic situation seems to be more stable. As things stand, we understand that there is some countries are being careful with the reopening, but we will still continue to encourage EU member states to implement a more coordinated approach to support the recovery of the tourism sector and welcome international travelers to Europe again.
So Taha, how ready is Turkey? Tell us about the measures taken with the start of the outbreak. And do you believe there are some political and economic reasons behind the EU decision?
Sure. I think I'll start with your second question first. We've seen from France's insistence that reciprocity be involved, meaning if they allow citizens of other countries to come to the EU, then the EU citizens must be allowed to go to their countries. We see that it's not actually a objective health-based, data-based decision here. I mean, there are European diplomats who have come out and said that there are geopolitical considerations being used. China, for example, is on the list of safe countries. But today, it released the worst case of the coronavirus pandemic in 3 months. So one of the criteria that the EU set out was that you have to have a decreasing amount of new infections for you to be considered safe. But that's not the case for over 20 of the countries that are on the list, which include 15 non-EU members and the EU members themselves. So more than half of countries are in violation of the EU's stipulated data criterion, but nevertheless, they're considered safe. As for Turkey, Turkey has taken a lot of measures. The fastest coronavirus testing turnaround time is in Turkey in Istanbul airport. For citizens, for people that are even transiting through Istanbul, they can have that test done. It's very cheap and very quick to do. Other than that, there is, as you probably know, for anyone who lives in Turkey, masks are everywhere. People are tested in in restaurants and other public areas. The country has very much quickly adapted to the pandemic and taken safety measures in accordance with that.
All right. So, Jennifer, now we're seeing spikes in some European countries, especially in Spain. Do you think the member states have taken the right measures or have lately eased them due to economic concerns?
The priority right now for EU member states is to ensure that they are putting in place all the sanitary and safety measures to protect their local population and tourists. So the pandemic has affected countries at many different levels. The measures that have been adopted have also been very different. So the success or lack thereof will determine the measures that need to be adopted by different countries, which could be more or less drastic. I mean, the virus never really left, and we're seeing how countries that are having second wave of infections are now reacting faster, and they also seem to be better prepared now than when they first had to deal with the outbreak.
So do you think we will see more travel bans coming into place?
We don't expect to see more travel bans. We hope this doesn't happen. In fact, the World Health Organization recently stated that closing borders to reduce the spread of the virus is not a sustainable approach. What we will see now will be more localized travel restrictions and recommendations for travelers visiting specific areas within a country, but not an entire destination. We will see more restrictive measures according to each country's evolution. Right. There is a lot of uncertainty still, but what is certain is that borders cannot be closed indefinitely.
So Taha, what lies ahead for the Turkish tourism year? Will it be a lost year for Turkey? And how will this, especially travel ban, impact the Turkish tourism sector as well as the Turkish economy? Is it surmountable?
Well, I think the one thing that we've noticed from around the world is the entire world tourism sector has been very badly hurt by this pandemic. All of Europe, the United States, South America, the entire world, as I said, is very much suffering this summer. Unfortunately, most of the summer has already passed now. We're in August at this point, frankly, and we have a month left. But the good news for Turkey is a lot of countries that have a high number of tourists coming to Turkey, including Russia, have allowed their citizens to come. A lot of Germans have come as well. So Turkey, in that respect, has recovered some of the losses. I would say that probably at least 50% of the total amount of tourists coming has been lost already, but it's not too late. You know, it's great weather in Turkey now, and I'm sure I know of a lot of tourists that are coming now. So I think Turkey will be able to recover as best as it can, but it won't obviously be anything like the years past. But it is definitely surmountable. I think for the future, it might be good to see that Turkey can deal with the pandemic successfully.
So Jennifer, when do you think we will be able to assess the damage economically and really know if the latest spikes are actually tourism related?
The effects of the pandemic are being devastating, especially if we consider how relevant tourism is for the European economy. There is an increased amount of uncertainty still. We're seeing how countries are going through their second wave of infections and re-implementing measures that were previously lifted. There is also an increased amount of challenges that we're still facing, the economic recession, job losses, a loss of also consumer confidence because of the different approaches that we're seeing countries implementing. So the picture is not very optimistic at the moment, and we do expect a decline of over 50% in international tourist arrivals to Europe this year.
Yeah. Taha, actually, you mentioned the Russians earlier, but we know that Turkey has long been dependent on European visitors. So do you think if this European travelers they keep staying away, do you think there are other parts of the world that Turkey look into to lure more tourists?
I think that would be a good idea, frankly. I mean, it's difficult to pivot so quickly, but I frankly have just came back from the Aegean coast of Turkey. It was beautiful. It was very not populated at all. So I see that there is a difference this year, definitely. But Turkey's beaches and climate and tourist destinations are world class. So anyone who has obviously good taste and is close enough can come into Turkey and enjoy these things. And I think they are. There are some countries whose citizens are finding out places that they couldn't normally afford are affordable, and so they're taking that jump. Is it too late for the Ministry of Culture to pivot to those countries? Maybe. I mean, we don't have much time left in the frankly, but who knows? At this point, I think the Europeans will notice quickly that the safe countries that they've stipulated aren't as safe as they thought they were, and yes. Probably by the end of the month, I think they will have to change and put Turkey on this list only because they will be embarrassed. I mean, Germany now has more cases than it's ever had in the last 2-3 months. So it's a resurgence of the coronavirus has started in Europe. So how can they claim that that these countries are safe when they themselves are not safe?
So Jennifer, how do you think coronavirus is reshaping Europe's tourism industry, and maybe in the foreseeable future, will cities rethink their business models once this pandemic is over?
I think that we need to accept first that the fundamental nature of tourism has changed. Travel needs to be resumed, and the best thing we can do right now is to adapt to the new normal as fast as we can and ensure that it's safe to travel across Europe. Destinations are now taking this opportunity to reassess their tourism strategies and make sure that we're able to provide a tourism industry to future generations that we would like to see. So one that is more sustainable and that respects more the local populations, the local economies, and that is what we're going to be seeing in the foreseeable future.
All right, Jennifer, Taha, thank you very much for joining us on Straight Talk. Appreciate it a lot. And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Ayşe Süberkaş. If you've got any comments, follow us and tweet at us at Straight Talk TRT. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.